A rude awakening. Medicine. 30 mg of 4-ACO DMT, administered orally. Intention. The intention was to repeat the experience I had with a previous trip, same medicine and dose, about 5 weeks ago. You can see the full trip report here. I'll link it in the description. After doing some research and posting the last report here, I understood I had a samadhi experience. I was shocked by the few glimpses I had of the Absolute and could not really understand it. And as a side note, for those who don't know, a samadhi is the experience of spiritual enlightenment when the self, the mind, and the object of meditation merge together into one. I also had the intention to try to get a healing trip. Some background. I've been doing Kriya Yoga daily for about 7 months now. I'm currently mastering the mental Kriya lesson, as described in the book Leo recommends in his video. I also do concentration training, 20 to 30 minutes daily, and I also sit to meditate, basically doing nothing before I go to sleep, for as long as I can remain seated. I have started to feel more energy moving through my body, and sometimes I can perceive the different frequencies of the chakras very strongly, for example at the end of the Kriya session during the concentration phase. This has also led me to be able to meditate and rest, doing nothing for longer periods, every time easier than the last. This is how I know that I have been integrating the previous trips I had. Until more recently I have managed to start contemplating. The trip. So I made all the preparations, and at 3:15 PM I took the medicine. Then I seated, relaxed and drank some ginger tea, as it helps me avoid nausea and body load during the come-up phase. I listened to some hang drum meditation music, which I also find great during the come-up phase. During this time I also made some bilateral symmetry movements. I started to have some visuals, though this time not so strong as in previous trips. I then started looking at my hand to get grounded in actuality, and I realised my fingers were moving very fast, almost as if they were vibrating. This is something that either I have not realised before, or I had not experienced until this moment. I found it interesting and just let it be. Around the 30-minute mark or so, I decided to lay down on the floor, over a mat. As I was laying there on my stomach, I was captivated by the fact that the mat was so close to my eyes, and yet seemed so infinite, endless, and so far away. I then suddenly entered this hyper-awareness state, and directly recognised that it was this similar experience from the previous trip. The boundaries of my body simply were no more, and I felt as if I was expanding very quickly. My breathing also slowed down a lot, up to the point I could not perceive it. I stopped listening to music as the effect of the medicine was getting stronger, and decided to concentrate and go full into the experience. At some point, something clicked inside of me, and I had this feeling that somehow I already knew all of this, as if it were an old memory from my childhood. It was as if I could remember I could access this hyper-awareness state when I was a kid, and I just remembered about it. I then realised that, as the ego tried to take back control, I started to feel overwhelmed by the connection with the infinite and the whole experience, but had no fear or anxiety. At some point I changed position and put on a couple of ear caps, because there were some external distracting noises. I started to notice a lot of high frequency sounds, and I was able to reach a deeper, higher level of awareness, and feel a very deep and strong connection with God, in all directions, and I also realised that I was in a state where time does not exist. I turned to look at my hands at several occasions, trying to ground myself in reality, and at least one time I remember I was not able to recognise them. I find it fascinating that I was very aware during the whole experience, that for moments I was not feeling the boundaries of my body, and yet I could move the eyes. I then had the realisation that God had taken control of my eyes and was looking at itself. It was also a very blissful state, a feeling of total completeness and full of love. And yet, as the ego was reassembling every time with more and more strength, I started to feel that I was losing it, that I was going mad. as my brain was trying to conceptualise and reduce to ideas the greatness of this blissful state. Around the 90-minute mark, I got really hungry and decided to go to the kitchen to eat something. I was still in this hyper-awareness state, in ecstasy and at the same time feeling completely mad for being able to feel such a deep connection with God so easily. I remember a moment I was standing by the window and being able to feel as if I was connected to everything and nothing. It was as if I could understand what a paradox is, for the first time, at the level of being. I had some food prepared, so heating it up in the microwave was not a very hard task, even though I found my clumsy movements very funny. I then started eating, and in the same time started to feel how the ego was getting reassembled. I had then this thought where I made the conscious decision to go back to the form state. And as I was making the decision to come back to the dream, this process just happened. I then get a glimpse of the infinite layers of consciousness that constitute reality in the self, and then the hyper-awareness state starts to fade away. I realise it by being able to see, feel and recognise my hand much more solid as I look at it. All of this happens as I hear my girlfriend getting into the house, and getting closer to where I am. I get this last thought as if I were reading the mind of God when she gets in the apartment. Oh, that is also me, but there I am not currently being aware of myself. I then had a very nice evening with my girlfriend, trying to tell her what I had just experienced, but I quickly realised that I just seemed like a complete insane person to her, which just brought me to laugh. One thing I really like from psilocin is that it shows my ways to be more social, to express my feelings and emotions more freely and easily, which I then see reflected in the conversations and interactions with others. Around 7 PM, 4 hours after taking the medicine, I went for a walk in the forest, which starts very close to where I live. I then realised that I felt very balanced and complete, and started to ask myself how I could integrate this and make it more permanent in my daily life. The next day I tried to reorganise thoughts and remember as much as I could, writing everything down on the afternoon and doing some other stuff. I decided to smoke some weed and just tried to relax and try to remember some more of the trip and concrete insights that I had. I know mixing weed with mushrooms and LSD is not a good idea, yet I'd tried a similar experience before where I had 100 UG LSD, and the next day I smoked a little bit of weed and the experience of the LSD came back, in a peaceful way. But this time it was different. After I smoked, I got shocked very deeply by the realisation that we are all one, that it is only me here, and I am always interacting with me, and I felt utterly and completely alone. I realised that I am just playing games with myself. I was like, oh my god, with the mouth completely open. I got very scared, and realised that my ego was totally rejecting this realisation. This time I really felt I was going really crazy and physically dying. I guess I was confronted with the paradox again, but I was completely rejecting it. I then started to panic, so I tried to sit down and meditate, but it only got worse. I realised I was having a panic attack, as I felt my blood pressure was increasing up to 130 BPM, and started to feel my body as very hot. So I changed my clothes to something lighter, drank some juice and took a cold shower. The cold shower really helped ground me again. All of this happened in a lapse of 10 to 15 minutes. I then told my girlfriend I just had a panic attack, because I had this strong realisation that I could not accept, and asked her to hug me. I felt so fucking humbled, as in that very moment I could understand what it means to love myself, seeing me in everyone and everything. I then could finally relax and start to accept this deep, deep insight. Conclusions. I got some powerful insights from these mere glimpses into the mind of God. I feel that for the very first time I had this realisation or awakening at the level of being, that felt several orders of magnitude or dimensions greater than a rational or conceptual realisation. I now know how following this path and accepting the unknown is a huge leap of faith, as I've never felt so scared in my life, and yet it comes with a great reward at the end, because deeply inside of me I can feel this deep connection with God. I got some understanding of what it means to be a singularity that has no diameter and is yet infinite in every possible way. I also got some understanding of what a paradox is, and how challenging and scary it can be when the mind tries to wrap around it, conceptualize it, and fails to merely accept it. At some point when my ego dissolved and I remained being here, it was as if nothing had changed. This made me realize I am God, and as God in the formless state, I cannot die, and that I have nothing to fear. I realized that this ego is just a part of me, and even after physical death happens, it will remain in the vastness of God forever. I also realized that time as I perceive it, linearly and progressing in just one direction, is just a projection of greater dimensions that are highly non-linear, and it equally does not exist. I also see how I have to accept everything, and not just the things that the ego find good or acceptable for my survival agenda. I have been doing the different practices very rigorously every day, and because of this I can see strong gains and progress on every trip, something that keeps me motivated during the low energy ego backlash phases. I love being mind-fucked, but it really scared the shit out of me that I felt I was at the verge of a psychotic breakdown, or about to die. Prior to this, I've not had so many strong anxiety or panic attacks for more than a decade. They all used to happen by abusing weed, which made me stop using it. I now understand that during these previous bad trips with weed, I may have had some strong realizations that I was not able to understand and accept. It isn't until just more recently that I've tried to approach weed again, in a much more calmed approach. I know that I made a mistake by smoking weed after taking the psilocin, and now I know that psychedelics are medicines that have to be highly respected. Questions. By now I have had around 10 psychedelic experiences between mushrooms and LSD, but just most recently I've started to feel that I am losing the sensation of reality and that I am going crazy. I have read that this is to be expected, but I just do not want to go in a wrong direction. I then started to question me. Shall I expect this process of going mad to become more intense? Or is it maybe because I am going too fast? Is there anything that can be done to make it lighter for the ego? Do you have any recommendations to better integrate the trips? Thank you if you made it this far. I hope that my experiences have helped you. Who knows? As always, thanks a lot to the great community of Actualize.org and to Leo Gura for all his works and great teachings.